Brazilians are hoping to rebuild their homes after severe floods. MAS presidential candidate Luis Arce has left the prosecutor's office in La Paz following the suspension of the hearing against him. Syrian government forces have liberated Marat alOunman, the second largest city of Idlib province, besieged by terrorist groups. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. Brazilians living in areas affected by heavy floods are trying to rebuild their homes after 28,000 people were displaced, according to the Civil Defense Agency. At least 65 people have been reported dead due to huge storms that tore through the states of Minas Gerais, Espírito Santo and Rio de Janeiro. Rescue efforts are ongoing as people remain missing and several thousand are in urgent need of food and temporary shelter. The torrential rain began on Friday. Authorities have declared a state of emergency in 100 towns, several of which were totally destroyed by the floods. The presidential candidate for Bolivia's MAS IPSP party, Luis Arce, has left the prosecutor's office in La Paz following the suspension of the hearing against him. Prosecutors suspended the hearing after 3 hours due to procedural errors. This included the delivery of the subpoena to Arce just minutes after he arrived at El Alto's airport from Argentina and before he passed through immigration. Arce and his lawyers have also yet to be made aware of the exact charges against him and of any evidence that links him to the alleged crimes. Upon his exit from the prosecutor's office, Arce was lifted up by supporters who had been waiting for him outside.
I've come here to testify because I have nothing to hide. I am not corrupt. I am not a thief. Lawyers and the prosecutor herself have noticed errors in the procedure, in how I was notified. Neither myself nor my lawyers have had access to the investigation to know exactly of what I'm being accused of. What is the alleged crime I have committed? Based on this case, I should have knowledge of at least 40 processes and more than 70 annexes. But thankfully, I was next to several members of the UN Human Rights High Commission.
And our correspondent, Freddy Morales, reports from La Paz on the case surrounding Luis Arce.
The public prosecutor of La Paz suspended the hearing of MAS party presidential candidate Luis Arce without any future date due to procedural errors in the trial, including in the judicial notice which he received yesterday at the El Alto airport, which was handed to him before he even reached migration. Arce and his defense must first be made aware of the procedure within 40 bodies and another 70 annexes. This means they must know first which are the charges laid against him and with what evidence.
And meanwhile, the coordinator of social movements in the city of Cochabamba said that Arce's arrival to Bolivia was a sign of hope.
Luis Arce, candidate of the MAS, arrived to the city of El Alto and was received by David Choquehuanca, candidate for vice president, representing social movements in Bolivia. In the midst of a coup and uncertainty over the political situation, they represent unity and hope to overcome the coup. We are sure that through a democratic path and a popular vote, we will be able to reverse the coup, which was carried out primarily against social movements and the poorest in Bolivia.
And the Constitutional Chamber of Venezuela's Supreme Court of Justice has declared that the decree of creation of the Commission for the Reorganization of CA Telesur Venezuela and its subsidiaries is completely unconstitutional and lacks any legal grounds. The decree was issued by opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó. The court accepted the petition for annulment submitted by Patricia Villegas Maron, current president of Telesur. The chamber also annulled the appointments of Leopoldo Gelamenes Castillo Atencio and Larissa Herminia Patio Godinho to lead the supposed reorganization of Telesur, and considered Villegas the only valid president of the multimedia platform. The ruling also stresses that any action undertaken in the name of Telesur that is not performed by the only recognized representatives of this corporation is invalid, and ordered international dissemination of the decision. And the president of Venezuela expressed his willingness to re-establish relations at a consular level with Colombia.
I am ready to re-establish relations at the consular level with the Colombian government in order to have smooth consular relations and all these issues can be dealt with consuls. Iván Duque, listen to me. Venezuela has political conflicts with all the countries of Europe, and yet all the countries of Europe have ambassadors in Venezuela. They have consuls, and we have permanent communication with European foreign ministers, who are 10,000 kilometers from Venezuela, and with Colombia, which we are separated from by just 2,000 kilometers, with 6 million Colombians living in Venezuela, yet Iván Duque refuses to have relations with the government that I preside, with the legitimate authorities.
And the lower house of Argentina's parliament opened a debate on whether to renegotiate the country's debt with the International Monetary Fund. Argentine President Alberto Fernandez wants to renegotiate $44 billion borrowed from the IMF over the last 18 months. The sum constitutes a sizable part of the country's $335 billion of foreign debt. Economy Minister Martin Guzman on Tuesday met with IMF officials in New York, and IMF spokesman Jerry Rice said that the talks were very productive. Peruvian political leader Keiko Fujimori has been detained once again. On Tuesday, a judge sentenced Fujimori to a new 15-month jail term as prosecutors continue their investigation into alleged money laundering. This new sentence comes on top of the 13 months she has already served in jail before her release last November. Keiko, the daughter of disgraced former President Alberto Fujimori, is accused of accepting money from Brazilian construction firm Odebrecht to finance her presidential campaign. And in Chile, a police truck hit and killed a fan of the Colo-Colo football club outside the team's soccer stadium in the country's capital on Tuesday night. The victim, 37-year-old Chilean Jorge Herrera Moya, died yesterday in La Florida hospital, where he was being treated for serious injuries. Several videos released on social media revealed that the police vehicle was driving at high speed and hit the victim without stopping. Meanwhile, onlookers who approached Herrera to help him were driven back by water cannons. The incident occurred as a crowd of 30,000 people attempted to leave the stadium after attending a match between Colo-Colo and Club Deportivo Palestino. The Peruvian community in Venezuela has rejected statements made by Peru's interior minister labelling Venezuelan migrants in Peru as criminals, as well as the announcement of a special unit to hunt down migrants. More details in the following report.
These are the declarations made by Peru's interior minister that sparked controversy.
These foreign criminals, these Venezuelans that enter our country to commit crimes, they only have two options: go to jail or leave the country.
Moran made these statements during a promotional video for the National Police, where he announced the creation of a migrant hunting special unit. The announcements were made while ignoring the fact that crime figures in Peru show that a mere 1.8% are committed by Venezuelans.
The unit will be focused primarily on fighting drug trafficking, kidnapping, violent crimes, and all other crimes that foreign citizens commit.
His statements were immediately condemned by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. They consider that messages that equate migration with criminality promote the stigmatization of Venezuelan nationals. As such, Moran's words seek to blame crime rates only on migrants. Venezuelan authorities also labeled the declarations as a xenophobic act and a violation against human rights that go against international norms, especially since around 800,000 Venezuelans live in Peru. The declarations raised concerns among the Peruvian community in Venezuela, like, for example, this Peruvian migrant who built his local restaurant and decided to stay in Caracas with his 3 children and 6 grandchildren.
I thank Commander Hugo Chavez because when I came to Venezuela, he welcomed us with open arms and helped us. I've been working here for 13 years. What is happening in Peru is a political strategy, because elections are coming up and that is why they are marginalizing Venezuelans.
In all countries, there are good and bad people. I don't think it's fair to generalize. I don't agree with a statement that calls Venezuelans thieves.
Peruvians are the third biggest migrant colony in Venezuela, where migrants from all continents have historically been welcome.
Since I can remember, there have been foreigners. I have grown up with them, but I don't see the acceptance being the same in other countries.
Venezuelans are no different from anybody. We are the same as Chinese, Africans, Jews. Everyone here, anyone is free to come and do whatever they want.
It's due to these xenophobic attacks and a lack of opportunities that more than 15,000 Venezuelans have decided to return home in a program promoted by the government of President Nicolás Maduro.
And a new migrant caravan will be setting off from El Salvador with close to 8,000 people trying to reach the United States. It is expected that the caravan will arrive to Mexico's southern border by this weekend. Activists and human rights defenders say that the National Migration Institute's strategy to stop the migrant flow violates human rights. Local political leaders have also recommended that migrants organize in order to defend their human rights collectively. Coming up, we'll take a look at the latest news surrounding the spread of the coronavirus that emerged in China. Don't go away. Welcome back. Chinese authorities have reported that there are now just under 6,000 confirmed cases of pneumonia caused by the new coronavirus, and the death toll has risen to 132. 65 cases of the coronavirus have also been confirmed outside of the Asian nation. The streets of major cities across China are virtually deserted as prevention measures remain in full effect. 30 cities and provinces have launched a level 1 emergency response, while Hong Kong declared its highest emergency response level. World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus announced today that the Emergency Committee on the new coronavirus will be reconvened on Thursday.
The continued increase in cases and the evidence of human-to-human transmission outside China are of course both deeply concerning, although the numbers outside China are still relatively small. They hold the potential for a much larger outbreak. I have therefore decided to reconvene the International Health Regulations Emergency Committee on Novel Coronavirus 2019 to advise me on whether the outbreak represents a public health emergency of international concern, and to seek their recommendations on how best to protect people all over the world.
Coronavirus prevention is definitely our top priority. The economy is a small matter for a country as big as ours. Everyone has contributed to prevention costs. Many enterprises and successful people are donating money to the infected areas. The money is not a big deal for our country.
Hospitals being built in the city of Wuhan are soon to be finished. Both hospitals will be fully dedicated to the treatment of patients of the coronavirus. Doctors in Wuhan, a city of 11 million people where the virus was first detected, had described overcrowded facilities and a shortage of test kits, protective gear and other medical equipment. In response, authorities announced the construction of the first hospital on January 24th, which is expected to be fully operational by February 3rd.
At this point, I'm basically working from 7 a.m. in the morning until midnight, with a 1 or 2 hour break in between, and on a 24-hour standby.
US President Donald Trump announced the details of his so-called Middle East peace plan on Tuesday. The proposal was unveiled by Trump at a news conference alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The deal recognizes illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank and, in a move seen as an attempt to fend off opposition, Trump proposed the creation of an independent Palestinian state with its capital in East Jerusalem. Many Palestinian organizations have vowed to reject any plan that does not include their right to self-determination and the right of all refugees to return to the lands they were driven out of by Israeli settlers. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad officials condemned US President Donald Trump's long-delayed Israeli-Palestinian peace plan that promised a new dawn for the region.
The announcement of the United States is part of the crimes committed by America, the Israeli entity, and the countries that have supported it. Our main mission is to have this deal dropped and confronted, to unify and to strengthen the Palestinian position, and to have a united Arab position to put pressure.
And soon after the announcement, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas denounced Trump's plan. Speaking after a meeting of Palestinian resistance movements, Abbas said that no amount of financial incentives will cause the people of Palestine to abandon their struggle. He added that they will not accept any deal without the return of occupied territories.
I would like to say to the duo, Trump and Netanyahu, that Jerusalem is not for sale, and all our rights are not for sale and not for bargaining. Your conspiracy deal won't pass. If Jerusalem will go, would we accept a state without Jerusalem? It is impossible for any Palestinian child, or Arab, or Christian to accept this. This is why we told them from the beginning, no.
And protests against Trump's announcements have been ongoing across the occupied territories. On Wednesday, demonstrators gathered in al-Kebra, north of the Jordan Valley, to express their anger at the United States and Israel for their continued attempts to remove them from their lands. Demonstrations are expected to continue throughout the week. And Palestinians in Bethlehem also protested against US President Donald Trump's long-awaited Middle East peace plan. Israeli soldiers fired tear gas at protesters who burned tires and threw stones at security forces. And in Turkey, a group of protesters gathered in front of the US consulate in Istanbul to condemn Trump's peace plan to supposedly resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
What they call the deal of the century will supposedly bring peace to the Middle East, but we will see an insurgency of the century against this agreement, which supports and legitimizes Israel's century of occupation. We will make efforts in Turkey to increase this insurgency.
Really, what we have here, from a real estate speculator, I mean Trump, what he has imposed on the Middle Eastern people, what he has written in his White House, as we have said in our press statement, this paper really isn't good for anything more than toilet paper.
And people in Yemen have also joined the growing criticism of Trump's Middle East peace proposal.
The Republic of Yemen condemns yesterday's show on the deal of the century, and the statement of the Yemeni Foreign Ministry was very clear. And I repeat it again. Anything that detracts from the rights of the Palestinian people, we reject it and condemn it, as a Yemeni people who is fighting with Palestinian people.
And after this break, residents in Zimbabwe's second largest city are facing serious water shortages. Stay with us for more. Welcome back. Syrian government forces have liberated Marat alOunman, the second biggest city of Idlib province besieged by terrorist organizations. Syrian government forces reported they are working to eradicate terrorism from at least 30 localities of Idlib province. They emphasized operations in the south of the region will continue until terrorist groups are completely eradicated. The Syrian army has been on the offensive for more than a month in northwestern Idlib province, the last rebel stronghold in the country. In recent days, the army has liberated more than a dozen villages in the area as the terrorist defenses begin to crumble. A massive invasion of desert locusts is currently threatening food security in the already vulnerable communities of the Horn of Africa, the United Nations stressed on Wednesday. A report released by the Food and Agriculture Organization has warned that the current swarms represent an unprecedented threat to food security and livelihoods in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia, Somalia and Kenya are facing serious threats to their crops. The FAO also informed that a potentially threatening situation is developing along both sides of the Red Sea, where ongoing breeding is causing locust numbers to increase on the coast of Egypt, Sudan, Eritrea, Saudi Arabia and Yemen. A swarm can eat enough crops in a day to feed 35,000 people, according to the UN agency.
Reviewing the situation when it comes to the desert locust upsurge that is currently occurring not only in Kenya but also affecting Somalia and Ethiopia. What is absolutely critical for us is that we anticipate a potential deterioration of the food security situation. We are in a region where over 11 million people in the three countries are already in acute food insecurity. Therefore, we need to make all possible effort to avoid such a deterioration.
And the UN Security Council called to stop the ongoing military escalation in Yemen before it's too late. Attacks have surged over the last few weeks after months of relative calm. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, reiterated the importance of halting the recent upsurge in violence between pro-government and rebel forces, following weeks of relative calm. The clashes between a Saudi and United Arab Emirates-led military coalition and Houthi rebels have already caused hundreds of casualties since they resumed almost 2 weeks ago. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, said child deaths from pneumonia are concentrated in the world's poorest countries, and it is the most deprived and marginalised children who suffer the most. Forecast shows 6.3 million children under the age of 5 could die from pneumonia between 2020 and 2030, according to current trends. Over the next decade, deaths are likely to be highest in Nigeria, India, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Ethiopia. Other cases of pneumonia deaths include malnutrition and lack of access to vaccines and antibiotics. The Global Forum on Childhood Pneumonia will be held in Barcelona from January 29th to 31st to increase awareness of the scale of this problem. The forum is a major opportunity to ensure that this threat is at the forefront of national and global health agendas. The president of the government of Catalonia announced this Wednesday that he would set a date for parliamentary elections once a new regional budget is approved. President Quim Torra, who leads a pro-Catalan independence administration, says he will call an early election amid splits in his government. This election comes as the Catalan separatist movement struggles to maintain unity among its three main political parties. A regional election was not due until 2021. Residents in Zimbabwe's second largest city are facing serious water shortages as local dams are running dry. Due to ongoing droughts in the past few years, water sources around Bulawayo have dried up and residents have been forced to use water from unsafe sources. They are calling on the government to declare the situation a national disaster. Zimbabwe is one of the most drought-affected nations in southern Africa due to continued climate change.
This water is dangerous, as you can see. Just check. Someone did his rubbish here. There's nothing that we can do. You see, yeah. But we still have to, because we need some water to use at home.
Actually, we're projecting that in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we might lose the third dam, which is alOunman. It's currently sitting just above 10% in terms of capacity. And we have also put together a paper to government for us to be declared as a water shortage area.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesourenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.